Okay, welcome back to the second part of the balance of payments. It is actually part 6 of the overall narrated PowerPoints, but this is the second part of the balance of payments, following on from the classwork that you did, which was looking at the financial account and the different financial transactions that could take place. Okay, so this next part, a bit shorter than the last example, but this is where we're going to look at doing some calculations based on your understanding of the different components of the balance of payments. Okay, so we've got a little table here in your booklet. It's included in your booklet, and I'd like you to do some calculations. So in the first instance, we've got the current account and the different components of the current account listed. And we've got inflows and outflows, and so you're going to have to do some simple maths to actually demonstrate that you understand the difference between the two. Okay, so you're going to get balances of some description. Some will be positive, some will be negative. I'd like you to have a go at that, doing that, and then also try to answer the questions below. So you've got 1, and then you've got A, which is what is the balance of trade, the overall balance of trade, and also what's the current account deficit in the above example. Okay, so again, I'm going to stop there for a moment so that you get a chance to, or you can stop the PowerPoint, stop the narrated PowerPoint, and basically have a go at completing that yourself. And then what we'll do is go through the answers together. Okay, so time for you to do a little bit of work now. Okay, so let's take a look at this example then. So in the first instance, we've got a number of different transactions that are taking place. Okay, we've got a trading goods. We've got an inflow of 500, but we've got an outflow of 1300. So that in that instance, taking the outflows away from the inflows, we've got a trading goods. We've got a deficit in trading goods of minus 800. Trading services, we've got 600 inflow, we've got 400 outflow. So actually, we've got a surplus in trading services. So we've got a 200 surplus in £200 million surplus in terms of trading services. Then we got investment income. We've got inflows of 700 million. And we've got inflows of 700 million, outflows of 600 million. So we've got a net boost to investment income of 100 million. Okay, and then we got current transfers. We've got 50 million pounds worth of inflows, but 18 million of outflows. So we've got another negative there. Okay, so overall, we've got a very big negative. We've got a couple of positives, and then we've got another negative. Okay, so in terms of the balance of trade, that would effectively be 600. Okay, minus 600, and the reason for that is essentially, if we remember what the balance of trade is, it's basically the trading goods take away the trading services. Okay, or combining the two rather. So in this instance, obviously we've got a negative of 800 million in terms of importing more than we export, but we've got a 200 million pound surplus in terms of trading services. But overall, in terms of the balance of trade, we are minus 600 million. Now, obviously, that means that we've got to use some form of financial instrument in order to balance that whole process up based on what we talked about previously. Okay, but let's take a look then in this instance what the current account deficit would be in the above example then. Okay, so if we take that as a combined, all of those elements combined, basically it would be negative 530. Okay, so we've got essentially two negative numbers where, so we've got minus 800 and minus 30, so that's minus 830, but we take the two surpluses away from that, and actually we end up with negative 530 as our current account deficit in the example shown. Okay, so hopefully that's just getting you familiar with the process, and if you are faced with something like that, you should be able to make a bit of a judgment on the current account and whether it's in deficit or in surplus. Okay, next thing I'd like you to take a look at is another table, which in this instance asks you to comment on what part of the current account this would fall into, which component of the current account would each of these transactions or activities fall into, and also whether it's an inflow or an outflow. Okay, so I'd like you to give that some thought, okay, and finish off and complete that booklet for me. Okay, so complete the booklet, complete the table for me. Okay, so think about whether what component of the current account it would fall into, and then whether it would be an inflow or an outflow. So again, stop the PowerPoint here, stop the presentation here, have a go at completing that, and then obviously we can go through the responses immediately after you've completed it. Okay, so the first one then, exports of UK manufactured goods. Okay, well, if we've got exports, that clearly is going to be a trade in goods, of manufactured goods, and that's going to be an inflow. So happy days. So manufacturing is generating goods and services, or goods rather, that we can sell, and that would be an inflow into our country. What about imports of food from Italy then? In that case, we've got a trade in goods again, but that would be an outflow because we're importing goods from Italy. How about earnings from foreign tourists in the UK? That clearly is going to be a trade in services because it's a service that they're using. They're not receiving a product as such. It's earnings from foreign tourists in the UK. They're coming and spending their money, and that would obviously be an inflow. Remittances sent home to Romania by migrant workers working in England. That would actually be what's known as a transfer, and that would be an outflow. Okay, so it's money transfers from obviously migrant workers into their home country, probably sent home to look after their loved ones. Okay. Interest, profits and dividends paid to overseas residents. That's going to be investment income, and that is also going to be an outflow, isn't it? Because in that instance, they've made a payment, they've made some sort of investment of some description. The overseas resident have, and they're going to receive investment income, which is interest, profit or dividends. But that is going to be an outflow from our balance of payments, okay? Purchase of oil from UK from abroad. Well, that's clearly going to be a trade in goods, and in this instance, because we're buying it from other parts of the world, that would be an outflow. Essentially, we're importing oil, aren't we? What about sale of coal to foreign countries? Well, similar sort of thing. That is going to be trading goods, but in this instance, it's an inflow because we've sold coal to foreign countries. Okay, I'm not sure whether that would happen very often these days, but anyway, there we go. What about UK aid to Jordan and Turkey? Well, that's going to be a transfer payment, isn't it? And in that instance, that would actually be an outflow because we're spending money on that particular service. Okay. Next one, profits received by UK residents from businesses they own in the USA. And that's going to be investment income, and in this instance that would be an inflow. Okay, so we've received investment income from those investments, we've got some profits, and that would be an inflow, but it would be investment income. How about a UK citizen or UK citizens visiting the USA for a holiday? Well, that's going to be a trade in what? Services, isn't it? Okay, and in that instance, that's also going to be an outflow because we're spending our hard-earned pounds on converting to dollars and spending them in the USA. So that's clearly going to be an outflow from the balance of payments. And then finally, last but not least, payments by overseas residents to domestic financial institutions for services rendered. In that instance, that would be a trade in services, and that actually would be an inflow because the overseas residents are using domestic financial institutions, so domestic being those that are based in the UK. So that just gives you, again, a little bit of a ready reckoner then to see the different types of transaction that you might find and where they fall within the current account of the balance of payments, whether they're inflows and outflows. Okay, so let's move on and take a look at some more calculations. Okay, so in this instance, we've got, and this again is all about just trying to get you used to the different elements of the balance of payments, okay, and how you then calculate the overall picture. Once you've done those numbers, once you've calculated those numbers, there are also a couple of questions that I'd like you to comment on in terms of the areas of strength and weakness in the components of the UK current account and whether there's any trend in these sorts of figures. Okay, so a little bit of calculation in the first instance, and you can see in this instance, if we take along the top, we've got trading goods, trading services. We know that's two elements of the balance of payments. We've got total trading goods and services, so we're clearly going to have to do some calculation between these two figures. Total net investment income, which is another source of income for the balance of payments, and also current transfers if there are any taking place. Well, in this case, all those appear to be negatives, don't they? For which must mean that they're going out of the country. So in this instance, then, the balance is a negative. So rather than the money going out of the country. So in this instance, in order to calculate our current balance, we're going to have to add A, B, D and E together. Okay, so that's the calculation that's required. I'm going to give you a few minutes just to do that, and then so stop the PowerPoint, have a go at completing those in your booklet, and then we'll look at trying to answer those questions too. Okay. So let's take a look then at where we are, and you can see that once these are filled in, that there are some quite interesting figures that are provided there. Okay, now again, some of the things that we'd like you to do based on those figures is to comment on areas of strengths and weaknesses in the components of the UK current account. Okay, so we can see that our trading goods is pretty much always negative. We sort of know that, don't we? We're not really a manufacturing-based country anymore, are we? We probably import more manufactured goods than we export. We don't probably, we definitely do. And on that basis, from 2006 right the way through 2013, we are significantly importing more goods than we are exporting. Okay. But trading services is a very different situation. You can see that our trading services has gone up significantly, it's almost doubled between 2006 and 2013. So that clearly is sort of helping to balance the books a wee bit. Although having said that, we are still significantly in deficit when it comes to looking at total trading goods and services. Okay. If we then take a look at the total net investment income, that is in most instances, apart from 2012 2013, that is a positive situation. I think that should actually be minus 1.7, that figure there, rather than minus 17 if we look at the calculation that follows. Just making sure that does make sense. And then you can look at the overall current account balance. As you can see, all the way through is a negative. Now, there obviously is a bit of a trend in those figures, and that's something that you could comment on. Okay, so that is another sort of set of calculations for you to get under your belt, and also looking at these figures, look at what the trend seems to indicate. Okay, what is the position? To some degree, we should know that. If we know that we are a net importer of goods rather than anything else, and a net exporter of services, then you'd expect that these sorts of figures to be pretty much as they're demonstrated there. Okay. Okay. Next question to take a look at then. If you flick over onto the next page of your booklet, you'll see that you've got a chart which shows the components of the UK balance of payments on the current account. Okay, and no great surprise, there are some interesting things being shown here. Okay, let me just move myself a wee bit over here to make it slightly easier for you to see. So we've got on one axis, we've got billions of pounds. Okay, and we're starting at if we take the point of zero, that point of zero is where we are actually in balance, if you like. We've not Yeah, so if we're above the zero, we're in surplus. If we're below the zero line, then obviously we're in deficit. Okay, in terms of what's been shown on the graph. Okay, in terms of the other things that we need to look at, that each different type of component is included there. So we've got trading services in blue, and again that all the way through from the date, the first date, which was 1998, right the way through to 2015, our trade in services has been a positive. Okay, it's been a bit of a success story. You can see that's in steady incline, steadily increasing, and it's gone from around about 15 billion right the way up to over 75 billion in that time frame. Okay. If we then take a look at net investment income, which is in red, then we've got, in general, we've got a reasonably positive scenario up to around about 2005, middle of 2005, down towards 2006. Then there's a slight drop, and then a significant drop around about 2008, 2009, an increase, and then obviously a decrease down into 2012, down through to 2013 and into 14. Transfers, again, money transfers generally are going to be a negative because they are transfer payments that we're making, okay? And then we've got the current account, the overall pattern, the current account line, okay? So we can see the current account generally all the way through from 1998 right the way through to 2014, or coming up to 2014, middle of 2013. We've got a significant negative position. Okay, so essentially probably caused by trading goods being in deficit, and as you can see, the trading goods, i.e. the fact that we are importing a lot more than we're exporting, is very much a slippery slope with a slight change around about 2008, 2009, but significant influence on the overall current account position, as you can see. And when we take all of those things together, then that clearly is painting quite an interesting picture, okay? The question that you might get asked is something along the lines of what you see on the left-hand side of the page next to the components graph. Comment on recent trends in the components of the UK current account and the overall balance. Consider if each component has a surplus, a positive value, or a deficit, a negative value. Okay, so in this instance, you need to go through and look at trading goods, trading services, each one, and see whether they were in surplus or in deficit. Okay, and then also overall, if you like, that's relatively easy to do, but this bit, the analysis bit, is what does this tell you about the competitiveness of the UK economy? Well, in general terms, that's suggesting that on an international competitive scale, then we can't be particularly competitive, can we? Because if we were more competitive, there would be a significant change in the trading goods trend, if you like, which has been very much a downward decline. Okay, so it would suggest that the goods and services, or the goods specifically that we're selling or attempting to sell, aren't particularly attractive, and maybe that's down to us being less internationally competitive than we would like. Maybe our costs are higher. As a result of that, our goods, the goods that we're selling, are not necessarily going to be competitive on a price basis. But also it may well be that the goods and services that we're providing, goods specifically, just aren't what people want to buy. And obviously that can clearly also have a fairly bad effect. Okay, now in your booklet there is some space for you to fill in some details on each of the trading goods, trading services, etc. So a little bit more space than is given on the PowerPoint here, and then also some comments on how competitive is the UK economy. Okay, so that concludes the second part, or the second part of the balance of payments. It basically finishes off part 6, and we'll move on and take a look at the next element of the balance of payments in the next presentation. Okay, so thanks for watching again. Hopefully that's been useful. Remember, guys, to use this. You can always go back and look at it again if you need to. Make sure you're using that to populate all of your booklet so that you've got a complete set of notes, which allows you to understand the principles of both exchange rates and the balance of payments. Okay, thank you for listening once more.